Welcome to the Ghostly Gallery podcast, a place where we explore the world of horror and mystery in film, literature, television, popular culture. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another show. My name is Bruce Markison, and I'm joined by my producer and co-host, Tracy Asteria. Tracy, what's going on with you?
Not too much, Bruce. Definitely getting into the season of fall and Halloween. How's everything going with you?
Yeah, things are going pretty good. It's been a nice season for the horror convention circuit. Been to Scaricon, been to Serling Fest, which we still haven't talked about. We'll have to do that on one of our upcoming shows. That was a
Mhm.
lot of fun as well. And another thing that we'd like to talk about is something on our YouTube channel. Of course, we air audio only on Podbean, and then we have audio and video on YouTube. But for our Podbean listeners, we do have the YouTube channel. And a bonus you get by going to our YouTube channel is the short videos that we have been airing for a few months now. And Tracy, bring us up to speed. How many of those shorts have we done, and where do you find them on our channel?
So we actually there is a playlist that's right there on the YouTube channel. It's called This Week in Horror, and there's about 45 videos on there right now. And they range from movie reviews to actor spotlights, memorial tributes, interesting facts, trivia. So check it out. Each one is it's less than 3 minutes each. It's very short content. And it is audio with a really nice visual kind of movie to go with it. And you always learn something new. And all of the topics are laid out, so you can just choose which one you'd like to watch, or you can watch them all. They're definitely a lot of fun, and you can learn some really cool facts about some different films that are out there.
Yeah. Now, you've done a few, but you're going to be doing more as we increase the number of these. We're going to go from doing 2 a week to 4 a week. So your workload is going to increase. You're going to be doing 2 of them, and I'm going to be doing 2 of them each week, right?
That's right. And we're starting that right now. So I think it's going to be pretty awesome. And I'm really excited to get some feedback from the viewers and listeners to see what they think. And if they have any suggestions of content they would like to see on the YouTube shorts, to drop an email or send you a message on your Facebook page, The Ghostly Gallery.
Yeah, it's been a great addition. Tracy came up with this idea, I guess 5 or 6 months ago, and it's turned out really well. Some of them get a lot of hits, and I think they're all pretty interesting and hopefully all well done too. We're going to talk on this episode about October Halloween related films. And we're going to have a return guest. He's one of our favorites, Dr. Jeffrey Thompson. Jeff is an author, historian. He is an authority on many, many movies, and also all the TV and film work of Dan Curtis, my favorite director in horror. And really, Jeff is a general authority on horror. He has written some terrific books. I have all 3 and have read them all and enjoyed them all. They're all well done. The television horrors of Dan Curtis, Dark Shadows, Night Stalker, and other productions. And he's also written House of Dan Curtis, the TV mysteries of the Dark Shadows Auteur, and Nights of Dan Curtis, the television epics of the Dark Shadows Auteur. The only thing I don't like is I have trouble pronouncing the word auteur, but I did my best, and the books are great. They're wonderfully done. We're very glad to have with us Jeff Thompson. Jeff, welcome back to the Ghostly Gallery. How are you doing?
Thank you very much, Tracy and Bruce. I'm doing great. I'm happy to be back with you to talk with you a little bit more.
And you told me before we get started, you wanted to say something, right?
Oh, yes. I've been staying busy writing some book chapters and speaking on podcasts. And on September 27th, I went to my friend Larry Underwood's live horror show. Larry Underwood is Dr. Gangrene, who is Nashville's TV horror host. He's been on many different broadcast and cable station since 1999, and he has a show every Saturday night on necatnetwork.org, NECAT network.org. But every 3 or 4 months, he does a live show. He does it live with a studio audience at a TV studio on the campus of Nashville State Community College, where I am teaching 2 English classes this semester. And Dr. Gangrene shows an offbeat movie like Spider Baby, The Undertaker and His Pals, Creature from Black Lake, Scream of the Wolf, The Devil's Partner, or Last Time Funeral Home. And then he always has a rock band in the studio, and he does trivia and interviews people and has popcorn. So that's always a lot of fun. Larry is an expert on TV horror hosts. You ought to have him here sometime. He could tell you all about all of the horror hosts, not just the ones here in Nashville. But he is writing a book about Nashville's TV horror hosts, and I have written the foreword to it.
Very cool.
So that's something to look forward to coming in 2026. And then on October 1st, a very unusual short film came up on YouTube. It's called Screening After Midnight. Just go to YouTube and type in Screening After Midnight, and it should come up. It's a 20-minute film directed by Ansel Farage, who does movies such as Loon Lake, The Great Nick D, Todd Tarantula, Dr. Mabuse, The Nighttime Winds, many of them featuring Dark Shadows stars in their casts. But this film is quite interesting because it explores London after midnight, the famous lost film that all of us fans would love to see someday. And this movie might just be the closest we ever get to it. Also, have you heard that Kino Lorber, the Blu-ray company, is putting out 4 Blu-rays featuring 11 Dan Curtis productions? The Jack Palance Dracula and Dr. Jekyll, 2 different productions called Dead of Night, Frankenstein, 4 of ABC's late-night wide world mysteries produced or directed by Dan Curtis. And Kino Lorber asked me to do the on-camera introductions to the film. So on the Blu-rays, I guess there's a spot where you can click and you will see me for 3 or 4 minutes talking about each movie. So I was thrilled to be able to do that. Kino Lorber came to my house back in April and filmed me. So I haven't seen the Blu-rays yet, but I hope to in a week or 2, and I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, that's great. I had heard about those Blu-rays, but I didn't know you were involved. I'm really glad to hear about that. And I didn't know at all about this Screening After Midnight. Ansel Farage is a friend of ours. Tracy has gotten to know him very well. He's been on, 2 or 3 times to talk about his movies and his love of Dark Shadows. So it's a small world.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Good stuff. Did you know about this, Tracy?
I think I might have seen a little snippet on Facebook a little while ago, but and now that we're getting so close to October 1st, I'll have to keep my eyes open and search for it once it's released.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you so much for the reminder on that, Jeff.
And by the time that this episode airs, it's going to be available in October, and it's for free on YouTube, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent. Screening After Midnight by Ansel Farage. All right, so Jeff's brought us up to date on his world, which is related to our world. And in tonight's episode, we're going to preview some of the horror films that are being shown during the month of October on the Movies TV Network. Their website is moviestvnetwork.com. And Jeff is the guy who clued us in. I'd not heard about this network, even though I had the friendly app. I didn't know that they did this marathon every October. We did a preview last year. We're going to do another preview this year. So they're going to be airing a slew of horror films throughout the month. It's not wall to wall. There are some days when they'll do other genres like film noir, but there'll be a lot of horror and sci-fi films, dozens and dozens of vintage films from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, all the way up to the modern day. So on this episode with Jeff, we're going to focus on 8 of the films that he and we find particularly interesting. one from the 1940s, two from the 50s, one from the 60s, and four from the 1970s. So we will jump right into this, Jeff. The first picture is from 1945, The Picture of Dorian Gray. Kind of an overlooked horror film, but one that should not be. It stars Herb Hatfield in the title role. So he's living in Victorian London, a young model who poses for a portrait, then receives it as a gift along with an ancient Egyptian sculpture of a cat. And at the suggestion of the absolutely evil Lord Wotton, Gray then begins to live a life of immorality and deceit, but he does not physically age at all. Instead, his image in the portrait grows uglier with each crime and with each sin that he commits, and he commits lots of them during the movie. Also, we have a very young Angela Lansbury in this film. She plays Sybil, who is Gray's fiancée. Interesting, Lansbury was not even 20 years old at the time when she filmed this movie. She delivers a superb performance and one that was good enough to earn her Oscar nomination. I'm curious, Jeff, was it jarring for you, as it was for me, to see Lansbury so young and in a role that's completely different from what everybody remembers her for? That's Detective Jessica Fletcher. Did it jar you too?
Well, not really, because I had seen several of Angela Lansbury's movies from the 40s, 50s, long before she did Murder, She Wrote. And it's interesting that she invited Herb Hatfield to come on to Murder, She Wrote 2 or 3 times. And in one episode, she even sang Yellow Bird, the song that she sings in this movie. There have been about 30 film versions of The Picture of Dorian Gray, going back to the silent movie days and up to the present, with people like Stuart Townsend playing the part, and Helmut Berger has played the part in the past. Dan Curtis produced a great version of The Picture of Dorian Gray with Shane Bryant and Fanula Flanagan and Nigel Davenport. That's coming out on Kino Lorber. But I would say that the two of the very best ones are the Dan Curtis and, of course, this gold standard version from 1945. It's in black and white, usually, except there are 4 very brief color inserts when we're looking at the painting. 2 when we're looking at the painting when it is still beautiful and depicts a young, handsome Dorian Gray. And that painting was done by Enrique Medina. But then, as you said, the painting becomes grotesque and hideous, and then we see it in color a couple of times, and Yvonne Lorraine Albright painted that picture, and you can see it if you go to the Art Institute of Chicago. It's been hanging there for decades. That's also where the Georges Seurat Island, Afternoon on the Island of La Grande Jatte painting is, the Sunday in the Park with George painting, which I think you can see up close in the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off. But yeah, so the beautiful painting was sadly auctioned by MGM back in 1970 when everything went, all of the costumes and props and paintings and everything. And since then, it's passed through two other buyers, and now is in a private collection. We don't know, but at least we can see that horrible painting, horribly wonderful, at the Art Institute of Chicago.
Nice. What did you think of this effect? You mentioned showing the painting in color. The rest of the film is in black and white. This was the decision of the director, Albert Lewin. Does it work for you?
Yes, it does. You know, there's a bit of color in The Tingler and a bit in The Amazing Colossal Man. And of course, The Wizard of Oz changes from black and white to color. So, in this movie, The Picture of Dorian Gray from 1945, it is startling and jarring, you know, when we're watching intently and then suddenly there's a burst of color, but it accents and emphasizes the painting and is a little bit gimmicky, but in a good way, you know. Yeah. So I think it adds a nice touch. Supposedly there was a 5th color insert, the very last shot of the picture as the movie is ending. But apparently the color clip of that was lost, and so every print has it in black and white. But at least we get to see those 4 little color snippets.
Jeff, you mentioned that this film and the one that Dan Curtis did really are top of the line in terms of the interpretations, the adaptations of Dorian Gray. What sets a film like this version from the 40s, above the others?
Oh, I think the fidelity to the novel. Oscar Wilde's novel came out originally serialized in a magazine in 1890, but then it was put together into the novel we know today in 1891 and has been influential ever since. And of course, even Dark Shadows used a storyline where Quentin Collins did not age because his portrait did. But the novel, the movie for the most part is very faithful to the novel, with a few changes, but and that was hard to do in 1945 because this novel is talking about all sorts of unspeakable debauchery and sin and transgressions that we really didn't hear or certainly see in movies in the 30s, 40s, 50s. So the writer who also directed, Albert Lewin, skillfully, used his words to get across as much as possible by hinting and suggesting, but never coming out and saying exactly what Dorian Gray was doing, other than, mistreating Sybil Vane, toying with her affections, and then causing her to take her life. And of course, later we see that he commits murder. He kills Basil, the artist who painted the picture. Sybil's brother, James, was after him, and we thought that maybe Dorian would have to kill him too. And in the Dan Curtis version, Dorian does kill him, simply just to add more sins to Dorian Gray. But in the novel and in this adaptation, James Vane is killed in a hunting accident. He gets in the way of the guns at a hunting event. So that's unusual. That's different, but at least it's another shock in the book. We weren't expecting that to happen at all.
Well, this is an excellent film. It's got a great cast. In addition to Hatfield and Lansbury, you've got George Sanders, you've got Donna Reed. Cinematography is beautiful. The special effects, I think, are very capable for the era. So no doubt this is a high quality film. And that brings us to our next film. We're going to move on to the early 1950s. And this is a film that Tracy will introduce us to.
Okay, so this next movie that we're going to talk about is The Day the Earth Stood Still from 1951. It was directed by Robert Wise and is one of the most influential science fiction films ever made. The story follows Klaatu, an alien visitor, and the powerful robot Gortz. They arrive on Earth with a warning that humanity's violent and destructive behavior must change, or the planet will face annihilation. As he navigates human society, he encounters fear and suspicion while trying to deliver a message about peace, responsibility, and cooperation. It mixes Cold War era anxieties and questions about morality, power, and our place in the universe. So, Jeff, what are your thoughts on this film?
I love it. I have always loved it. It's just a fantastic film. Like The Incredible Shrinking Man, The Day the Earth Stood Still is one of the best science fiction movies of the 1950s, one of the best science fiction movies ever made, one of the best movies ever made. It just hits every note perfectly. And of course, Bernard Herrmann's music is so fantastic. His score uses strings, brass, theremin, organ, piano, and percussion, but no woodwinds. And so that gives it a strange feel. And I like how it's so realistic. if a flying saucer landed in Washington, D.C., this is what would happen. This is how people would react. And it's, the verisimilitude reality is accented at the very beginning because of all of the radio and television broadcasters who are playing themselves, H.V. Kaltenborn and Drew Pearson, Gabriel Heater. These are names and voices that people heard on their radios or early television sets. They saw them. And so to see them in this movie giving these reports of the flying saucer has landed almost makes it as real as the 1938 War of the Worlds radio broadcast from 13 years earlier. So it comes in like gangbusters with that great Bernard Herrmann theme and all of the sightings and the reports and the panic and everything, and then it just keeps going from there. The cast is wonderful, and Michael Rennie is perfect. Some people are born to play roles. Anthony Perkins was born to play Norman Bates in Psycho and Javert in Les Miserables. But Michael Rennie is just perfect in The Day the Earth Stood Still. Now, at one point, Claude Rains was considered to play Klaatu, and I think maybe even Spencer Tracy. Those are two of the greatest film actors ever, but they would have not been right at all for this because Michael Rennie at this point was mostly unknown to American audiences. He had done work in England, but we really were not yet aware of him in America, just as, we really had not seen Jonathan Frid before he began playing Barnabas Collins in Dark Shadows. So the fact that an unknown quantity was playing Klaatu really made it easier for us to think, well, this strange man I've never seen before must really be an alien from outer space. So that was a wonderful touch in casting. And then, of course, Patricia Neal and Hugh Marlowe from Earth versus the Flying Saucers and the soap opera Another World, and Sam Jaffe, and we see Francis Bavier from the Andy Griffith Show, and Billy Gray from Father Knows Best. So everything just comes together, in this movie. There are some movies that are essentially perfect. North by Northwest is one, Casablanca, Chinatown, Matinee, Tootsie, several, and this one is essentially perfect. Some people say it's a little bit too talky or heavy-handed, but I think it's just terrific. The conversations and the talking are fascinating and enthralling. It keeps our attention. So I always enjoy revisiting this movie and have seen it many, many times on VHS, DVD, Blu-ray. And the first time I saw it, I guess, was in 1977. I hadn't seen it before then. But, of course, in 1977, everyone was crazy about science fiction because of Star Wars. And several movies came back into the theater, Barbarella and others. But there was a little art house theater in Nashville at that time, not the Belcourt Theater, the world famous Belcourt Theater, which has existed for 100 years, but another one that was operating briefly. And it showed, quite a few science fiction films, of course, on the big movie reels on a projector. And The Day the Earth Stood Still was one of them. THX 1138 was another one. And 2001: A Space Odyssey, and I think maybe Forbidden Planet or Creature from the Black Lagoon, I've forgotten. But so I believe that was the first time I had seen it. So it was a revelation then and still is now.
Oh my gosh, I agree. I think this is an excellent movie. I really, really enjoy it. I'm curious, what's your favorite scene in this movie?
Oh, I like the scene in which, the scenes in which Klaatu and Bobby go around town in Washington, D.C. and look at the cemetery and the Lincoln Memorial, and then go to Professor Barnhart's
Right.
house, Sam Jaffe, and Klaatu looks at the chalkboard and all of the quantum mechanics and physics equations and calculations, and starts changing things. So I like that scene, and I like the last scene. I like the very first scene when Klaatu and Gort first come out of the craft. And the script was written by Edmund North, who wrote several other science fiction movies, but it's based on a short story by Harry Bates that was in an astounding science fiction magazine in 1940 called Farewell to the Master. Back in the 70s, Marvel Comics did a faithful adaptation of the story. This movie is not exactly a faithful adaptation of that story, Farewell to the Master, because in it, it's made very plain that Gort is the master and the leader, and Klaatu is his subordinate. Now, we get a hint of that at the end when Klaatu tells everyone that the different planets have created this race of robots to help keep order and police the galaxies. But I think for the sake of a Hollywood movie, it made more sense to have the leading man, the human actor, as the focal point of the film, along with the leading lady, Patricia Neal, who's from Tennessee, over in East Tennessee, and with a little hint of love interest, but not overdone. You know, they were close friends. Maybe there was an attraction, but that was not the main thrust of the film. We didn't need that because of everything else that was going on. Far more earth-shaking events that were going on than a love interest. But you know what Carl Denham in King Kong said, that the investor said to him, if this movie had had love interest, it would have made twice as much money. I don't think that would have been true with The Day the Earth Stood Still, but I think it's right just the way it is.
No, I totally agree. I absolutely love Michael Rennie's performance, and I'm a big fan of the robot Gort. I thought he was pretty terrifying for a robot back in the 50s. So I definitely love it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that is a raving endorsement for that movie. Wow. Day the Earth Stood Still, 1951. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. I'm real curious now to hear your thoughts on our next film, Jeff, also from the 1950s, 1956, with a great title, The Bad Seed. This film stars Patty McCormick as an 8-year-old girl named Rhoda. And this ain't Rhoda from Mary Tyler Moore. This is a whole different character. On the surface, this little girl seems prim and proper, intelligent, mature beyond her years. But in reality, she has a very dark side, including a bad temper and a very misplaced sense of values. And when it becomes apparent to her mother, Christine Penmark, that her little Rhoda may have been responsible for the drowning death of one of her classmates, well, she struggles in trying to decide what to do, how to handle this situation. All the while, Christine continues to suffer from nightmares, which indicate that she may have also had a troubled past, along with a fear that she may have been born to a different mother and father. So a lot going on here. So, Jeff, believe it or not, I only saw this recently for the first time. In fact, earlier this week. You believe I'd never seen this. What a disturbing film. Just a few minutes in, Rhoda throws a tantrum about not having won a penmanship medal at school and shows such an ugly side to her personality that is extremely horrific, but at the same time is done believably. What was your first reaction to this craziness with Rhoda?
I love movies that are overwrought, like The Bad Seed, Obsession, Dead Again. You know, I just love the hysterical nature of some films, and this one has quite a theatrical nature to it, because It's very much like a filmed stage play, which it was. It began in 1954 as a novel by William March, and then in that same year, the famous playwright Maxwell Anderson adapted it for the stage. And so then 2 years later, in 1956, Mervyn LeRoy directed this film, which follows the play very faithfully until the end. But the performances, are at a fever pitch, and need to be, because of the highly disturbing things that are happening in the movie, and the dread we're feeling about, well, what is this child going to do next? And it's fun to see Eileen Heckert, later of Burnt Offerings, in an hysterical role that got her an Oscar nomination for supporting actress and won the Golden Globe for her for supporting actress, as the mother of the little boy who ends up dead, and we fear that he died at the hands of this bad seed child, Rhoda. And the play and this film started off a whole subgenre of horror films, bad seed horror films about troubled children or possessed children, like The Exorcist, or a great movie, The Other, based on the novel by Thomas Tryon. That's another movie that's going to be on the Movies TV network this month, The Other. So I liked the film quite a lot. So many great performers, show up. Frank Cady from Petticoat Junction and Green Acres, and Jesse White, whom we've seen in everything, Matinee and The Maytag Repairman, Henry Jones and William Hopper. But as I say, the film closely follows the play and novel until the very end. And getting back to what we were saying about Dorian Gray, it was hard to depict certain subject matter in films of the 30s, 40s, and 50s into the 60s because of the stringent codes and censorship. So at the end of the play and the play and the novel, Christine gives her daughter Rhoda sleeping pills, and we think that the girl is going to die. And Christine, overcome with such terrible guilt and remorse and horror, shoots herself in the head. And we would think that that would kill anybody, and that's what happens at the end of the novel and the play. So the mother, who is the good character, dies, and the little girl, who is the bad character, lives on to create more mayhem. But when it came time to make the movie, the studio decided, well, that we can't have an ending like that. We have to make her pay for her crimes, the daughter. So the way the film ends is that amazingly Christine survives the gunshot wound to her head. I guess that's possible. It happens in Night of Dark Shadows too, with James Storm. But so Christine survives the gunshot wound and lives on. But Rhoda goes down to the pond where her mother had thrown in the metal, 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 and is trying to fish it out with something made of wire, a net or a hook or something that is a conductor. And so there's a big thunderstorm and lightning storm going on, and the lightning comes down and strikes her and kills her. A real deus ex machina type of ending, of a way to end the story, but it was shocking. It certainly got its point across, and she paid for her crimes. And then because this was a stage play, and in another attempt to sort of make it a little bit more tame and soft pedaled, after the action of the movie ends, then it becomes a stage play because the actors do a curtain call, which is not the best touch in the world. I think it's certainly unnecessary and maybe sort of blunts the ending too much, especially at the end when Nancy Kelly puts Patty McCormick over her knee and spanks her. That's, of course, we don't like to see that at all today, but even back then, I thought that was unnecessary humor. It was played for laughs, but we didn't need to see that because we should have just been left with the shock of the lightning strike killing the bad seed child.
Yeah, that was bizarre. That was really weird. You thought the movie's over. They do the curtain calls. They show the actors' names with graphics. And then the two leads, they come out and the spanking takes place. And yeah, they were trying to be funny. It was just bizarre. But I'll tell you, those two actresses, Patty McCormick and Nancy Kelly, who played Christine, both nominated for an Oscar. Pretty unusual for a horror film. Both were outstanding.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah, Nancy Kelly, who didn't make very many movies, but of course is great in this, really conveys the mounting dread and fear and horror of, what is my daughter? Why is she like the way she is? And compounded with that, what am I? Am I a bad seed? Because am I the child of a serial killer from Australia? And was I born bad? And that why my little girl is? So it's quite a disturbing film, and I would love to see a stage version of it. I've never seen it on the stage. I would love to see it performed with the rightful ending.
Very interesting, Jeff, that apparently Alfred Hitchcock had a chance to direct and he turned it down. And that's weird because this seems like exactly the kind of film he would have loved doing.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know, what happened. I guess his plans changed or the studios or something, but that is kind of a missed opportunity. Although, Mervyn LeRoy did a fine job of directing, and, some of his shots, like when the handyman who is on to the girl and her evil deeds is electrocuted in the cellar or whatever, that is photographed skillfully. So I think it obviously still turned out to be a great film, and maybe Hitchcockian in a way, but it is not a Hitchcock movie.
No. The film tries to tackle this interesting question. Is mental illness, along with a desire to kill, something that's inherited, passed on from one generation to another? Or are these tendencies learned because of the environment you're brought up in? I don't know if the film clearly gives an answer to that. Do you think they do, or do you think they leave it open-ended?
No, I think they leave it for us to decide, and I think people are still trying to decide the nature versus nurture question of how much, how much we are formed by either hereditary or environment. So it's a thought-provoking play and film that makes us keep thinking about it after we have seen it.
Yeah. All right. Great assessment of The Bad Seed. And we now turn to a film that is completely different, has nothing in common with The Bad Seed. Tracy, tell us about this one.
So this one is from 1964. It's called The Last Man on Earth, and it stars Vincent Price in one of his most haunting roles. The film follows Dr. Robert Morgan, a man who believes he's the sole survivor of a plague that has turned the rest of humanity into vampire-like creatures. By day, he hunts and destroys them, and by night, he barricades himself into his home, just waiting for dawn. Beyond its eerie atmosphere, the movie is about loneliness, survival, and the thin line between man and monster. And Vincent Price brings quite a sadness to this role and makes this version stand out apart from later adaptations. It's a fascinating piece of horror and science fiction. So, Jeff, what are your thoughts on this one?
Well, I love the writings of Richard Matheson, Somewhere in Time, which my students and I just finished watching, and now the students are writing essays about the film. The Incredible Shrinking Man, I Am Legend, The Legend of Hell House, so many great novels and short stories. And I Am Legend, the novel on which The Last Man on Earth, The Omega Man, and I Am Legend are based, is the single most significant and important and influential vampire novel since Dracula and until Salem's Lot and Interview with the Vampire. Um, Matheson dealt with vampirism in several of his short stories. No Such Thing as a Vampire, which later was filmed by Dan Curtis, and that's coming out on Blu-ray. This is this is the first of at least 3 different film adaptations of I Am Legend, The Last Man on Earth, the only one in which Richard Matheson had personal input. And then, of course, The Omega Man, starring Charlton Heston. I have shown that to my students in the past. And a lot of some of that is similar to a 1959 movie called The World, the Flesh, and the Devil. Harry Belafonte, Inger Stevens. If you ever run across that, watch that one and look for some similarities between it and the Omega Man, the mannequins, and a few other things. And then more recently, 2007, I Am Legend, starring Will Smith. That came out in December of 2007. And in January of 2008, one of my classes at Tennessee State University, and I read the novel and discussed it, made sure we knew what all of the vocabulary words meant, and talked about the ideas in the novel and the science versus supernatural and things like that. And it was a wonderful moment in my teaching life when one of the students at the end said, "The book is better than the movie."
Oh, wow.
Almost always true. Not always, but I would say 98 or 99% of the time, a book is always going to be better than the movie adaptation. So I'm glad that the students learned that. But for The Last Man on Earth, this was co-written by Richard Matheson, although he wasn't completely pleased with it, so he took his name off of the credits and used a pseudonym, Logan Swanson, his and his wife's mother's maiden names. But previously, I think as early as the late 50s, Hammer Films, Anthony Hines of Hammer, wanted to make I Am Legend, film it, and he bought the rights to it, and Matheson wrote a script, which I think has been published. You can find it floating around. But back then, the British censors vetoed the script totally. They said, "Oh well, that novel cannot be filmed. That is unfilmable. We can't allow that." So Anthony Hines sold the script to another producer, Robert Lippert, and he's the one who made this movie, filmed in Rome, Italy, and co-written by Matheson and William Leister, and directed by Sidney Salco and Ubaldo Ragona. The music is by a couple of good jazz musicians, Paul Sawtelle and Bert Schefter. It's interesting to see, a few of the landmarks of Rome in the picture. And you're right, this is one of Vincent Price's most unusual performances. Not necessarily one of his best. His best would be those in Witchfinder General, Madhouse, the Dr. Phibes movies, and of course Theater of Blood. But I think one marvelous bit of acting that he does in the film is when he is watching the reel of movies, home movies of his life with his wife and daughter, and he starts laughing uproariously, laughing, and then it becomes crying. His laughter changes into weeping. So that was a wonderful moment of his acting performance, and just a great poignant moment in the film. So uh, you know, he may not have been as well suited to the action segments of the story as a Charlton Heston or a Will Smith was, or maybe back in the '60s, maybe a Steve McQueen type or a Lee Marvin type might have done it a different way. But what the way he does it is quite good, quite captivating, and holds our interest and makes us feel for Robert Morgan. I don't know why the name was changed from Robert Neville, but we feel for Robert and sympathize with him, and are horrified right along with him when he sees his wife come back from the dead, and when he sees his old friend now turned into this horrible night creature, and when the dog is infected with the plague too. So it's quite the movie has quite a lot of pathos in it, and Price plays it well. And of these several adaptations, I meant to say there is ostensibly a fourth adaptation, a TV movie called I Am Omega, which was made for the Sci-Fi Channel. But in these three main adaptations, this one is the most nearly faithful to the novel. The Omega Man goes off on wild tangents. It's a spectacularly entertaining movie, but it's not necessarily the story of I Am Legend. The Will Smith movie is terrific too, but doesn't really capture the vampire aspect as well as it should, because the creatures in that version of I Am Legend are creatures. We don't know what they are, but they don't seem to have very many human qualities to them at all. And then, of course, some fans maintain that an unofficial remake of I Am Legend is Night of the Living Dead, because
Really?
it has many similarities. And true enough, if you happen to turn the channels and see just a little bit of this Last Man on Earth, where you see the creatures banging at the door trying to get in, you might think, oh, is this Night of the Living Dead? And at a convention, Richard Matheson remarked that he was turning the channels one night and saw a little bit of Night of the Living Dead, and he thought to himself, oh, someone has filmed my story again. So it was extremely influential in not only in terms of vampire literature, but also zombie literature, or any sort of returning from the dead type of creature.
Oh, interesting. I really love this movie, and I did kind of get like the zombie type reference as well. And I just rewatched it earlier this week, and the scene that you referred to earlier about Vincent Price's character, kind of confronting his now vampire zombie type wife at the door. Um, there was actually a scene almost like that in one of the Walking Dead episodes, and it triggered me right away.
Mm-hmm.
That turning of the door handle, and just kind of like the wife saying, let me in, because that's what happened in The Walking Dead. So I imagine The Walking Dead took that idea from this movie, but I think it's fascinating. And I thought it was really interesting, just kind of like the zombie slash vampire type character. What did you think of that choice, of the way that they made that type of a character?
Oh, it was certainly striking for the film. I think if you simply read the novel, it tends to lean more toward a vampiric angle, although not the typical supernatural type of vampire like Dracula or Barnabas Collins, but a more realistic, there again, I'm using that term, realistic approach to, well, what would happen if some sort of plague or disease or germ came upon the earth and changed, altered people, into something inhuman, into these night creatures. So, But yeah, this film makes great use of the makeup, with the sunken eyes and everything, and the way they talk, in a way like this, which may not necessarily be the way Matheson envisioned it in his book, but of course in film that's a great touch. And the Omega Man takes it in a totally different direction. And, Charlton Heston tells them, take off those Halloween costumes.
Oh my gosh. It is an absolutely fascinating movie. I definitely appreciate your input on this one. So thank you.
You're welcome. You want to talk about something else? Another movie?
We
So
do.
many great movies are running this month on movies, exclamation point. A lot of the Hammer films, Horror of Dracula, Curse of Frankenstein. The other that I mentioned, The Haunting, another great movie directed by Robert Wise. I don't think we mentioned him enough when we were talking about The Day the Earth Stood Still. One of the greatest directors ever, because he was so versatile. He directed The Day the Earth Stood Still, The Sound of Music, West Side Story, The Haunting, I Want to Live, Sand Pebbles, The Andromeda Strain, The Hindenburg Rooftops, and Star Trek: The Motion Picture. And,
Oh, wow.
And then edited Citizen Kane and other films when he was a film editor. So he was quite versatile. Mark Dawidziak, whom you may have had on your show, and if not, you need to, pointed out that people may not give him enough credit because he was so versatile. You can't point to him and say, oh, he's a horror director, or he's Alfred Hitchcock, or he's Steven Spielberg, or he's a romance director, or he's an epic director, because he did all of those things and did all of them very well. So he was quite versatile and diverse in his career. And when the American Film Institute gave him the Lifetime Achievement Award, he ended his thank you speech with the immortal phrase from The Day the Earth Stood Still, Klaatu Barada Nikto.
Oh, that's so cool. He is an excellent director. I really loved his film, The Haunting, which I actually just saw I think within the last couple of weeks for the very first time.
Oh,
I
yeah.
thought it was one of the best ones I've seen in a really long time.
Great one. You never really see anything, but it's just the great atmosphere of that movie and your feeling of dread of what is beyond that door. When you hear that banging on the door, that's so scary. And, the whole atmosphere that you are immersed in when you watch that film.
That's right.
I'm going to
Absolutely.
continue with Dr. Jeff Thompson in just a moment. We will take a short break. When we come back, Tracy and Jeff are going to discuss the 2 Planet of the Apes films on Dr. Thompson's list. And then I'll talk about 2 films from the early 70s as well, Night of Dark Shadows and The Night Strangler. Stay with us. We'll continue on the Ghostly Gallery podcast in just a moment. Welcome back to the Ghostly Gallery podcast. We continue our Halloween October preview of horror films on the Movies Television Network. They've got the great marathon of horror and science fiction films, really from many different eras, ranging from the 50s all the way to the current days. We've talked about 4 that Jeff Thompson has highlighted for this month on that network, but we still have 4 to go. And our next 2 films are from the Great Planet of the Apes series from the late 60s and early 70s. And Tracy's going to introduce us to a film that actually represented my first ever visit to the theater. I saw this film. I don't think I saw it when it originally came out in 1971. I think I may have seen it a few years later, because if it was 71, I was only 6. And I don't know if my parents would have taken me to see the film at that young an age. But I did see it in the theater. I do remember it as my first theater experience. And it's a movie I still love to this day. Tracy, tell us the name of the movie and tell us more about it.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so we're definitely talking about the Planet of the Apes. So the one that we're going to talk about right now is Escape from Planet of the Apes from 1971. It's the third installment in the original Planet of the Apes series. This time, the story takes a bold turn as Cornelius, Zira, and Dr. Milo travel back in time to 20th century Earth via a space pod. Upon arrival, they're treated as scientific curiosities and now find themselves in a world that is both fascinated and terrified of them. It blends science fiction, suspense, and social commentary. And there's a little bit of humor and tension and some thought-provoking ideas that make this installment very unique in this franchise. So I'm a huge fan of the Planet of the Apes movies. So Jeff, why don't you tell us a little bit about this one and why you like it?
Oh, I love Escape from the Planet of the Apes. It's the best of the sequels, almost as good as the original. The 1968 Planet of the Apes, of course, is one of the greatest movies ever made, highly influential in that year of 1968 when we saw Planet of the Apes, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Night of the Living Dead, Rosemary's Baby. But what I like about the Planet of the Apes movies, all of which I adore, is that each one is so different. You know, the first one is just landmark science fiction and filmmaking, and the second, Beneath the Planet of the Apes, is more like an Edgar Rice Burroughs type adventure, whereas Escape from the Planet of the Apes is a serio-comic, often poignant, quite meaningful social satire. Conquest of the Planet of the Apes is a much more hard-hitting, brutal social commentary about man's inhumanity to man and ape. And then Battle for the Planet of the Apes, the weakest of the five, obviously, but still very entertaining, is more of a fantasy film and more suitable for all ages. I've always thought, however, that we needed at least one more movie as a bridge from Battle back to the original Planet of the Apes, because at the end of Battle for the Planet of the Apes, humans are still intelligent and talking and living alongside apes. So we needed to see what happened to make humans devolve into the dumb animals living in the fields that they were in Planet of the Apes. So I wish that we could have had at least one more movie to show us that devolution. But Escape from the Planet of the Apes is fantastic. And, the first movie was intended just to be a one-shot adaptation of that novel by Pierre Boulle. But because it was such a hit, 20th Century Fox wanted a sequel, and so that's why Beneath the Planet of the Apes occurred. But at the end of that movie, of course, the world comes to an end. Doomsday, the end of the world, as Charlton Heston says. So how do you have a third sequel? Well, Paul Dane, the great writer of those four sequels, and he co-wrote Goldfinger and other films, decided maybe he had seen Dark Shadows, because he decided, well, we've sort of written ourselves into a corner in the present time, so let's go back into the past and look at a completely different group of people as we send one or two of our characters back into the past. So that's what happens. And we see Roddy McDowall, who returns to the film series, and the great Kim Hunter, and as well as Sal Mineo as a new ape character who doesn't last very long in the film. But we see them, return to our present time. Actually, back then it was still the future. We were living in 1971, but the movie takes place in 1973. Jerry Goldsmith's music, is fantastic. It was nominated for an Oscar for the first film, and it's just absolutely wonderful with its otherworldly eeriness. And his music for Escape from the Planet of the Apes has a much more contemporary, often playful edge to it as we explore, the love story of Cornelius and Zira and their adjustment to life in 1973, early 70s for all of us. And of course, that first scene where the spaceship is dragged up to the beach and the astronauts gloved and helmeted come out of the spaceship, and the military men are there. Welcome to the United States, and they see the helmets come off, and we see apes. That's a fantastic moment of shock, horror in a way, and hilarity in a way, because this movie has more of a light-hearted touch to it. In some places, not at the end, it has a horrible ending, just devastating. But that's what makes it such a great movie. It hits all of the emotional notes. We're happy, we're joyful, we're excited, we're shocked, we're horrified, we're depressed, throughout the film because of the multifaceted script and the events and the great cast. Everybody we've seen in every movie and TV show is in this. William Wyndham, Albert Salmi, Jason Evers, John Randolph, and of course Ricardo Montalban, and Eric Braeden, who has starred on The Young and the Restless for the last 45 years. So we get to see him as a much younger man. He was only 29 or 30 years old when he made this film. His real name is Hans Gudegast, and that's what he went by in his early movies and TV, but then changed his name to Eric Braeden. And if you haven't seen Colossus the Forbin Project, be sure and watch that movie. And sadly, Eric Braeden's house burned all the way to the ground in those Los Angeles fires
Oh my
from
goodness.
6 or 8 months ago. But fortunately, he and his family were unharmed. But I watch him on The Young and the Restless every day, so it's always fun to see him turn up in a great movie like Colossus or Escape from the Planet of the Apes.
Oh
So,
my gosh.
so this movie is just highly enjoyable. Just a delight, despite the awful things that happen in some parts of it. But the acting, Roddy McDowall and Kim Hunter, have such a wonderful chemistry, and they interact so well with Bradford Dillman and Natalie Trundy, wife of Arthur P. Jacobs, the producer. Natalie Trundy shows up as a human or an ape in almost all of the films, so it's good to see her. And and then I love the explanation of time travel. That scene where we see the artist painting a picture, and then the artist painting a picture of the artist painting a picture, and so on. In comic books, we fanboys call that an infinity cover. So that was a fun scene. And then, of course, when Cornelius and Zira change into early 70s clothes and go to the hotel suite and all of that, that's the calm before the storm, before things get much more menacing and dire for them as, she undergoes truth serum and reveals more of her time in the far-flung future. And then, of course, they have to go on the run after the accidental death of the orderly who calls Zira's baby a monkey, which is a complete mistake. The difference between monkeys and apes. Monkeys have tails, and apes do not. Apes are chimpanzees, orangutans, gorillas, whereas monkeys are the smaller animals with tails. And then the whole sequence in the dilapidated boat ship where they're hiding, and of course Hassline comes and finds them. It's interesting that Charlton Heston mentions Hassline in the very first movie, and now we see him living in the early 70s. And then the horrible way that all three of the apes, Cornelius, Zira, and the baby, die. But then the shock at the end, the welcome shock of seeing that Ricardo Montalban as Armando has the real child of Cornelius and Zira safe at the zoo, and the baby starts rocking back and forth, holding the bars and saying "Mama, Mama, Mama." So that's just a great movie. Every scene, is memorable and emotional to us, and we can quote all of it to this very day because it's just burned into our consciousness.
Oh, absolutely. It's such a fantastic story, and I love kind of like exploring life through Zira and Cornelius. Like I just think they were so perfect. The ending was so sad to see that happen, but I absolutely loved it, and I love Zira as a character. Her grape juice plus just
Mhm.
gets me every time. Oh my goodness. Bruce, did you have any questions or anything, comments for this one before we move on?
No, I think it's interesting that there is a few comic moments, like we see Cornelius in that ridiculous multicolored robe. Which,
Mhm.
we look at it now, it's ridiculous, but in the 1970s, those were the kinds of color patterns that people wore with their clothing. But then that ending is so sad, so poignant, and I, remember seeing the theater and being somewhat devastated. And I don't, because I was so young still at that time, I don't think I totally comprehended that their child actually did live. I don't think I really understood that until later sightings of the film or viewings of the film when I could understand better exactly what was going on. But it's a movie that really does give Roddy McDowall and Kim Hunter a chance to flesh out their roles. They become the primary characters in this one, whereas they were important characters in the first film, but more of a secondary nature. And I love the movie, and I'm glad to hear, Jeff, that you like it so much. I think it's very underrated. Obviously, not by you or me. We like it, and Tracy likes it as well. And you can make a strong argument that of the 5 films that came out in the franchise at that time, late '60s, early '70s, maybe this is the second best after the original.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So now we can just move on to Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, which was released in 1972, and it's the fourth installment. So we follow Caesar, who is the son of Cornelius and Zira, so the baby, and he grows up in a world where apes are enslaved and oppressed by humans. He witnesses cruelty and injustice firsthand, but he emerges as a leader, rallying the apes to revolt and claim their freedom. The story, like you mentioned, Jeff, it's a lot darker and much more intense than some of the other films in this series, but it's very action packed and explores, you know, rebellion, oppression, and it's just an excellent movie all the way around. What are your thoughts on this one?
Oh, this one is another fantastic entry in the 5-film series, written again by Paul Dane and directed by J. Lee Thompson, with music by Tom Scott this time, although at the very end we hear Jerry Goldsmith's familiar music from Planet of the Apes. And once again, a great cast. Ricardo Montalban comes back, and Natalie Trundy this time is Lisa, an ape. And we see people we recognize from television: Hari Rhodes, Severn Darden, and Gordon Jump, even as the auctioneer in one scene. And it is jarring to see Don Murray, whom we may know from his Broadway roles or Bus Stop or as Sid Fairgate on Knots Landing, playing a horrible, despicable person in Governor Breck, and he really plays his role with relish. It's he really makes the most of that maniacal, despotic, tyrannical role, and I love that speech he has about we hate the apes because there's still an ape curled up in each of us, and so this movie was tampered with by censors, even though the Hays Code had faded away 10 or 12 years earlier by this time. But the original cut treatment version of the film, which is on Blu-ray, you can see it, differs greatly from the theatrical cut from the early 70s. because at early screenings, um, the audience just found some of it just too hard to take, and mothers were carrying screaming children out of the theater because it's much bloodier, it's much more violent, and at the end, when Governor Breck, is lying on the ground, and all of the apes have the butts of their rifles uh, uh, near his face, and they're about to kill him, Caesar tells them not to. He says that the apes can afford to be humane, an ironic word, because the war is already won, and tonight we have seen the birth of the Planet of the Apes. Also, Lisa says no, the second ape to speak, and that was not in the original cut. The original ending is that the apes do smash and kill Governor Breck. And
wow.
it's much more of a violent exchange, and Caesar's rhetoric is much more fiery and belligerent and militant. So the studio decided, well, we'd better soften this. We'd better make this a lot tamer. And so you may have noticed at the end, very often all you see are extreme close-up shots of Caesar's eyes. You don't see his mouth because Roddy McDowall went back in and recorded some new lines, but the mouth on the film would not match. So we don't see his mouth when he's saying all of this, when he's saying, well, we'll stop here. We won't go any farther because we are victorious, and this will become the Planet of the Apes. So the movie suffers a little bit in that abrupt turnaround, but so many Hollywood movies have had quasi-happy endings tacked onto them. Come Back Little Sheba ends in despair, but the last scene of the movie has a little bit of hope to it, and you can think of many other examples. But this one is another solid entry in the series, perhaps echoing some of the unrest and violence that swept across the country in the late 60s and early 70s. Like I say, every single movie in the series was something totally different. It it was not just a rehash and a remake every time. It added to the story and extended it and developed it. So so this one is quite good, but here again, a lot of scenes are very hard to take, like the electrocution scene that is just awful. Roddy McDowall does such a great acting job in that, the way he contorts his body and everything. And then if you see this unrated version, this original cut, you'll see a lot more blood. That patented shiny red blood that you see in so many movies in the early 70s. It's not quite the look of blood, but we recognize that look of early 70s blood, almost like shiny red paint lacquer or something. But so yes, so I like this one too. I love all five of them, especially 1 and 3. And I've always liked 2, Beneath the Planet of the Apes, because that year, 1970, began my lifelong fascination with ruins. Because in that year on Dark Shadows, I saw Collinwood in ruins in the future year of 1995. And then I saw New York City in ruins in Beneath the Planet of the Apes, the subway, the New York City library, public library, and all of the other things. Of course, we had seen the Statue of Liberty in the final shocking moment of the first movie, but we really got much more into the ruins in this second film. And that big staircase set was reused from Hello Dolly and made to look crumbled and decayed and dilapidated. That's where the mutants were standing, and so I've ever since then I've been fascinated by ruins and abandoned places and ruined buildings, and so I that goes back to Dark Shadows and Planet of the Apes, two of my big fandoms.
Oh my gosh. Well, they're definitely a wonderful series of movies. I'm curious, have you explored any of the newer versions of the Planet of the Apes movies?
Yes, my favorite is the very first one.
Mhm.
Uh, I think that one uh, is quite well done, quite meaningful, quite unsettling and upsetting. Um, the ones after that have been more of an action slash adventure slash war sort of film. But I thought that the first one was especially thought provoking and tied in well with the original movies, and a lot of the in jokes, in that first one, the use of the nickname Bright Eyes and things like that weren't overly cute, but were just nice nods and to homages to the original film and nods to us fans who would pick up on them.
Oh, awesome.
But I of course have seen every single one of these new Planet of the Apes films and have enjoyed them. But nothing can replace or surpass these five truly groundbreaking films that back when they came out, no one had ever seen anything like it. 1968 was a big year for Apes because of that prologue in 2001: A Space Odyssey, which was quite realistic in terms of the apes. And then, of course, John Chambers and Dan Stripeek's marvelous Oscar-winning makeup effects for these apes in the films, and that looked totally real. When you looked at them, you didn't think of Roddy McDowall, the bookworm on Batman, or Kim Hunter from A Streetcar Named Desire. You saw these talking apes, and you saw them as these characters.
Oh yeah, and I think they did so well with all that prosthetics and all the makeup. They did excellent. It's like one of my favorite series of movies. Oh, I definitely appreciate your thoughts on this one. Thank you so much.
Just
And I
one
like
final
the
point.
live action TV series too, and the
Yeah.
cartoon series, both of which were different and had their own qualities, and good points.
Yeah. You did mention briefly, Jeff, the actor Harry Rhodes. He is my favorite actor and character in this film. It's not a huge role in terms of screen time, but he is, as the assistant to the evil Governor Breck, he is the voice of reason, intelligence, very dignified, uh, very handsome looking guy, completely well spoken. To me, he is the shining light there, and yet it's a conflicted situation for him because he's horrified at the way that Caesar is being treated by Governor Brett, and he helps Caesar escape and survive. But at the same time, he knows that is going to lead to the de-evolution of the human population. But he can't just sit there and watch Brett treat this creature with such disrespect and just such an awful way. And I just love Harry Rhodes. He was a brilliant actor. It's too bad that they didn't use him more in this series. It's too bad that he didn't get better roles. He was a black actor. I think, because of the color of his skin, didn't get the opportunities to do the kinds of films that he wanted, and that's why he turned to writing novels. But he's great in this movie.
Yes, he is. He's the conscience and the heart of the film. I wish he could have been in the next one. He was in one of the segments of the TV show The Bold Ones and did other TV work. But yes, he's always been one of my favorite actors too, and he does a great job in this film.
Yeah, I love him in this movie. He's just great. All right, we've got two movies to go. Next up, we have from 1971, Night of Dark Shadows, and this is the follow-up to the very successful House of Dark Shadows. If director Dean Curtis had been left alone by a meddlesome producer, this follow-up film might have achieved status as a 1970s classic. Now, Jonathan Frid decides to opt out of the project due to his displeasure with the violence in House of Dark Shadows. So Curtis turns to a theme of witchcraft centered on two of this TV series' other stars, David Selby and Lara Parker. Selby plays Quentin Collins, no longer a werewolf as he was in the series, but an artist who has just inherited the Collinwood estate. He and his new wife, played by a very young Kate Jackson, move into the beautiful mansion where they meet a very odd caretaker played by Grayson Hall. And Quentin is soon haunted by the ghost of a witch named Angelique, played by Parker. Angelique had an affair with one of Quentin's ancestors. So, Jeff, this turned out to be a bit of a Plan B movie because of Frid's decision not to take part. How do you think Curtis was able to do in terms of compensating for his absence?
Oh, I think Night of Dark Shadows is a good movie, which could have been a great movie if MGM had not ordered Curtis to cut about 25 minutes of the film. In addition to exploring the idea of witchcraft and whether Angelique was or was not a witch, it harkens back to the 1970 parallel time storyline on the TV show, which is very similar to the novel and the movie Rebecca, about, a man bringing his new wife back to the home where his dead wife used to live and seems to still have a presence and beloved by the obsessed housekeeper. As you said, the complete version of Night of Dark Shadows would have run almost 2.5 hours, but MGM head James Aubrey, nicknamed the Smiling Cobra because of the way he dealt with people sometimes, ordered Curtis to severely cut the movie and gave him just 24 hours to do it. So Curtis and an MGM film editor had to sit in a room over 24 hours and cut the film. So the complete script exists, and almost all of the thought to be lost footage exists. It was discovered by Darren Gross in a Kansas City salt mine where MGM kept movies back in 1999. And for years, we fans have been fervently hoping and wishing that a complete version of Night of Dark Shadows would come out, because years ago now, all of the living members of the cast, and at that time all of them were alive except Thayer David and Grayson Hall, went back into a recording studio and re-recorded their lines to match the footage. Most of the footage was silent, unfortunately. The picture was there, but not the sound. So David Selby, Kate Jackson, Christopher Pennock, Diana Malay, Nancy Barrett, John Carlin went into a studio and re-recorded the lines. And at a convention, David Selby told me that was the hardest I've ever worked in my life. He said, we realized that we had not followed the script verbatim. We were paraphrasing the lines, and we really didn't know what we had said. So we had to call in some lip readers to come in and tell us exactly what we were saying, on the film, so that we could say it again and re-record it. So, I just wish that the studio would come out with that complete version, because that would be a fantastic moment in Dark Shadows fandom and in film preservation. And I think that, if we could see the complete film, it would be a minor masterpiece of 70s horror. It's a very interesting story. So much of it we don't get when we watch the movie as it exists today, at about 94.5 minutes, because we don't know whether Angelique really was a witch or not. Was she a witch, or was she wrongfully accused? And why is Diana Malay laughing at in the funeral scene? Well, it's because the 1810 Quentin Collins's body is not in the coffin. He's been locked up in the deep cellar of Collinwood, and we learn more about Jim Storm's character of Gerard, not the Gerard from the TV show, but a different Gerard, and how he apparently is the nephew of Carlotta Drake, Grayson Hall's character, of the housekeeper. And we see many other scenes that we don't get to see in the film because they were truncated or eliminated completely. There's a nice scene, a flashback scene of Quentin and Angelique sitting at the piano. You've seen stills from that, perhaps. And then Quentin's wife, Laura, played by Diana Malay, walks in and interrupts. All of that footage exists, but we don't see any of it in the film. So, but what we do see is good. I think the Boston Globe said that Night of Dark Shadows is a horror movie for people who don't like horror movies, meaning that it is unusual. It's a change of pace. The horror, at least until the end, maybe when there is some blood, doesn't really hit you in the face. It's more of an atmosphere, kind of like The Haunting and Burnt Offerings and other movies that just immerse us into an atmosphere in which we create the horror just as much as the film does. And like House of Dark Shadows, Night of Dark Shadows was filmed at Lyndhurst, the fabulous estate on the historic home on the banks of the Hudson River in Tarrytown, New York. And, many of us Dark Shadows fans have taken trips there to Lyndhurst to tour the house and see the different rooms, that we see so clearly in House of Dark Shadows, and even more so in Night of Dark Shadows. In a way, the two movies' titles could be reversed because Barnabas Collins prowls during the night of Dark Shadows, but the second movie is much more centered in the House of Dark Shadows and the different rooms where the characters argue or face conflict or fear. And we see, that second floor high ceilinged gallery, and we see the tower room and so many other parts of the house, and then parts of the estate, like the swimming pool and other buildings on the estate. So yes, Night of Dark Shadows is an acquired taste. The first time you watch it, you might not care for it, especially after you have seen House of Dark Shadows, which is much more attuned to the TV show. However, some fans don't like House of Dark Shadows because it is so gory and bloody, and even though it uses the established TV characters, Barnabas, Julia, Maggie, Willie, it goes far more into the bloody horror aspect of Dark Shadows, as opposed to the gothic mystery and romance that was Dark Shadows on television. But most Dark Shadows fans like or love both movies. I certainly do. But each one is different. That's what makes them so interesting and so rewarding to watch, because neither one, even the first one, is not a carbon copy of what you saw on the TV show. It goes off into different directions and different types of horror and thrills. And Night of Dark Shadows even has a car chase, which is something you never would have seen on the TV show.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, I think your assessment of Night of Dark Shadows is on the money. It's a good movie. The reviews have been unfair over the years. I had heard so many bad things about it. Then I watched it when it was on Turner Classic, and I thought, this is pretty good. And certainly it could have been great if not for that executive's meddling with Dan Curtis, maybe one day we will see this film in the form that Curtis intended. And that brings us to our final film, another film directed by the great Dan Curtis. That's The Night Strangler from 1973, the sequel to the hugely successful Night Stalker, another made-for-TV movie. Darren McGavin returns as the monster-hunting investigative reporter Carl Kolchak. He has moved to Seattle, where he is reunited with his hot-tempered newspaper editor, Tony Vincenzo. This time, Kolchak is confronted with a series of strangulations that have been accompanied by a severe loss of blood. And during his investigation, Kolchak makes his way through the city-stained labyrinth of underground passageways. And then he eventually learns these strangulations have been happening in Seattle every 21 years, dating back to about the late 1800s. And that's where the supernatural aspect of the killer is introduced. While the first film is far more acclaimed, there are some fans of this series of movies and the TV show who actually believe The Night Strangler is the better movie. Jeff, in your mind, which of the two is the best?
Well, that's hard to say. Some people like Joe Dante have said it's just as good as, maybe if not better than. Gary Girani came right out and said it's superior to the original. But with sequels, you can't have The Empire Strikes Back until you have Star Wars, or you can't have Scream 2 or Gremlins 2 or The Godfather Part 2 until you have the first movie, which is literally the original. The first time we see these characters, the first time we are put into these situations, and a sequel, a good sequel, builds on that. But it has to have the first one in order to have something to build on and make even more enriched by revisiting and re-examining and rediscovering. So both films are fantastic, and both were big ratings winners for ABC, especially The Night Strangler, which, The Night Stalker, which immediately knocked Duel and Brian's song off the top of the list of the highest rated made-for-TV movies. And I believe Night Stalker is still in the top 20 of the highest rated made-for-TV movies. So ABC was... and by the way, speaking of movies and their sequels, this month on Movies TV Network, you can watch both House of Dark Shadows and Night of Dark Shadows, and The Night Stalker and The Night Strangler. And Movies, ! Is owned by Weagle Broadcasting, the same group that owns MeTV. So that's why you've been seeing some of these Dan Curtis movies show up on both Svengoolie and Movies, like Dead of Night, Trilogy of Terror, Dracula, Night Stalker, Night Strangler, and so on. So ABC was eager for a sequel, and so once again turned to director Dan Curtis, who had only produced the first movie, and writer Richard Matheson of Somewhere in Time and I Am Legend. And Matheson at first wondered, well, how can I top the first movie? The Night Stalker is based on a novel by Jeff Rice, who later went on to write another novel, The Night Strangler. But Matheson thought to himself, well, we've started at the top, so what can we do? How can we top a vampire in modern-day Las Vegas? And so he thought, well, what about Jack the Ripper? Bring Jack the Ripper to Seattle. Because Matheson and his family had gone on a camping trip to Seattle a few years earlier, and Matheson was familiar with the town and the Seattle Underground, which you see in the film. I visited that when I went to Seattle in May of 2000. And so Matheson toyed with the idea of using Jack the Ripper, but he was close friends with the great psycho author Robert Bloch, who was fascinated with Jack the Ripper and was a Ripperologist himself. And he had written Yours Truly, Jack the Ripper, the short story, which had been dramatized on radio and television. And one of his Star Trek scripts, Wolf in the Fold, is about a Ripper-type spirit that possesses someone on board the spaceship. And so Block had written many short stories and novels about Ripper-type characters with split personalities. And so Matheson called Block and said, I'm thinking of writing this movie using Jack the Ripper. And Matheson said, I could tell from Block's tone of voice that he didn't like the idea and that he was disappointed. And so Matheson said, I scrapped the idea. I didn't use it. Now, that was very nice of Matheson because Robert Bloch does not own Jack the Ripper. Nobody owns Jack the Ripper. So Matheson could have gone right on with his plans, but because of his longtime friendship with Bloch, decided to leave that alone. Ironically, the first episode of the TV series, Kolchak the Night Stalker, which had no involvement from Matheson or Curtis, uses Jack the Ripper. But at this point, Matheson went back to the drawing board and decided, well, how about, a Civil War era surgeon who has found the secret to longevity, but every 21 years he has to concoct a new mixture, a potion to keep himself young, and part of it involves blood, and so he has to go out and kill and extract blood. So he's been doing that every 21 years since 1889, 1910, 1931, 1952, 1973, and so on. Obviously, what Matheson came up with, and then directed by Curtis and starring Darren McGavin again, was an infinitely worthy follow-up to The Night Stalker, because even though it is very similar, it has its differences, and it expands the universe and explores the characters even more, such as the heightened bickering and fussing between Darren McGavin's Carl Kolchak and Simon Oakland's Tony Vincenzo. And some of the aspects of Jeff Rice's Night Stalker novel that Matheson did not use in the first movie, he came back around and used in the second, such as the college professor role and drawing a sketch of the killer, and Kolchak throwing something through Vincenzo's glass window and breaking it. That's from the novel, because Jeff Rice saw that when he was a reporter at the Las Vegas Sun, working with a Kolchakian reporter named Alan Jarlson, who was, a hothead and a live wire, and going out on limbs to get stories, and constantly in conflict with the Las Vegas Sun editor, who fired this reporter 14 times in 2 years. So Jeff Rice had been around all of this, and that's what makes the stories so real. Jeff Rice had lived it, and then Matheson faithfully adapted most of the aspects of the novel and got 2 great stories out of it. And I mentioned the Seattle Underground, and we see Kolchak riding on the Seattle monorail, and he and Joanne Flug, a marvelous actress, ride the elevator up to the top of a Space Needle. I went up there too when I visited in May of 2000, but I had to go see the Seattle Underground because I had seen it in The Night Strangler, and the tour guide pointed to a love seat, some sort of furniture prop that was in a corner, and said that was left over from the filming of The Night Strangler. So it was still there in the year 2000.
Yeah.
But many of Dan Curtis's movies have such a strong sense of place, because it's filmed at a house like Lyndhurst, or Dunn's Muir House and Gardens, Burnt Offerings, or because it uses local color like it did, Night Stalker did, Las Vegas, and Night Strangler, Seattle, and so on. And so you get a good taste of Seattle in this. And then another great point of this movie is all of the wonderful character actors you see. You see the Wicked Witch herself, Margaret Hamilton, and you see Grandpa Munster, Al Lewis, and the wonderful Wally Cox, and Richard Anderson, whom we've seen on everything from Perry Mason to Bionic Woman to Westerns, and Ivor Francis, Jeannie Francis's father, and Scott Brady, one of Dan Curtis's favorite actors. Dan Curtis had a habit of casting actors whom he loved from old Hollywood or early television in his movies. And, he put Elisha Cook and Kent Smith in The Night Stalker, and Herb Hatfield, the star of our picture of Dorian Gray from a few minutes ago, in the Norliss tapes. And Dale Robertson was in his 2 Melvin Purvis G-Man movies, and Clint Walker in Scream of the Wolf, Gig Young in The Great Ice Ripoff, and several in Curse of the Black Widow, June Allison, Sid Caesar, June Lockhart, and others. So Curtis was attuned to those great character actors from decades ago, and like other directors before him, like Orson Welles and Robert Altman, and directors after him, like Joe Dante, Fred Olen Ray, Ansel Faraj, Curtis tended to use the same actors many times. If he liked someone and if he liked that person's acting, Curtis would use her or him many times. He used John Carlin 14 times.
Wow.
And Scott Brady from The Night Strangler in 6 of his movies. And Peter Graves and Jack Palance and Polly Bergen and other people showed up 2, 3, 4 times. Catherine Lee Scott showed up about 4 times in Dan Curtis productions. So Mills Watson, Jeffrey Lewis, father of Juliette Lewis, all of these great character actors, Harris Yulin, Royal Dano. If you look closely, even Curtis's handyman, Orrin Cannon, who wasn't really an actor, but just as a much older man got into acting, pops up in quite a few of Curtis's films. So I loved seeing all of those familiar faces, in this movie, people like Scott Brady, Wally Cox, Margaret Hamilton. That adds, flavor and texture to a movie, and endears it to you. It doesn't really take you out of the movie, even though you see, oh, there's Margaret Hamilton. By then you're so into the movie that you accept these people as these new characters, but you are comforted by the sight of somebody like Al Lewis or somebody that you have watched on TV or in movies your whole life. So that, I think that's an asset of Curtis's movies. It humanizes them, even in the horror films. You have touchstones like Betty Davis in Burnt Offerings and Joan Bennett in House of Dark Shadows. So I like The Night Strangler very, very much. I would say fairly equal to the original, but like I say, you can't really have one without the other, and each one builds on the previous one. So I like both of them. And Matheson and his friend William F. Nolan, another great writer whom Curtis used over and over, co-wrote a script for a third movie, which would have been called The Night Killers and set in Honolulu. And it was about UFOs and aliens, and the aliens kill prominent politicians and leaders and replace them with android lookalikes. We've seen that plot in other things since then, but at that time it was much newer of an idea. But ABC did not want another movie. ABC wanted to go straight to a series, and neither Curtis nor Matheson was involved in it. Both declined. Dan Curtis, in a rare moment of bad judgment or being short-sighted, misinformed, said it can't be done. I don't see how it can be done. Having a different monster week after week in a TV series, you can't do it. Of course, now, after many years of our watching Supernatural, The X-Files, and Grimm, we know that we can apparently have a monster of the week. But Darren McGavin himself did not want his show to be just a monster of the week, although it works so well for The Outer Limits. But McGavin wanted to go in different directions, not all of them supernatural.
Yeah.
He wanted to have some episodes in which Carl Kolchak was a reporter crusading against organized crime, or corruption or embezzlement or something. I don't know whether that would have gone over well, because we were tuning in expecting to see a vampire, a werewolf, a zombie, a this and a that. And if it had just been a regular story about corruption, that might not have worked. But McGavin wanted that, and was displeased that it did not go in that direction. And he was one of the reasons why the show was not renewed. He was losing interest. You know, and maybe it was getting hard for the writers to come up with a different monster every week. Well, so that's why we got a 20-episode TV series instead of a third movie.
Right.
And then, of course, years later in 2005, Stuart Townsend attempted to play Carl Kolchak in an ill-fated, short-lived remake called simply Night Stalker. And ABC didn't even bother to show all of the episodes because it was such a ratings loser, although a year later we saw all of them on the Sci-Fi Channel. However, the two best episodes of that remake series were essentially remakes of The Night Stalker and The Night Strangler. They are the two best episodes, and if you ever track those down on DVD, watch those two, and you will enjoy them. But many of the other episodes of that show fell short, although there were a few good ones. Vince Gilligan wrote one, which is kind of like a Night Gallery episode, so that was one of the best, but some of the others just did not have the effect that we would expect from a Carl Kolchak television series.
Also very difficult to replicate what Darren McGavin did. He was one of a kind.
Unique.
In that role, yeah. Well, that's The Night Strangler. It's a great film. I would give it a slight edge over The Night Stalker, but who knows? In a few months, I might change my mind and go to The Night Stalker. They're both great. There's not a lot of difference in quality between the two. That's going to wrap up our conversation on these 8 films. I do want to highlight a few other movies that are being shown on the Movies TV network during the month of October. They include The Beast Must Die, Curse of the Demon, Curse of Frankenstein, The Devil's Reign, Dog Soldiers, The Fog, From Beyond the Grave, The Fury, The Haunting, Pacific Heights, and Village of the Damned.
And the other. And the other. That's a good one, too, yes. There's a lot of others that will be shown, but these are just a few that will be highlighted during the entire month. You can find out more about the Movies TV Network by going to their website. It's moviestvnetwork.com. And if you click on where to watch and then plug in your zip code, you can see where it is available in your area. If you have the Friendly app, which I do, and it's great, and it's not very expensive, gives you over 40 stations and networks, and one of them is the Movies TV Network. So that's another way to view these great films coming up during the October Horror Marathon. Well, Jeff, as always, you're terrific. We really appreciate having you on. You're one of our favorites. Thanks for being with us. Thank you so much, Tracy and Bruce. I really enjoy coming and talking with you about movies. It's just wonderful. So thank you for asking me back.
Absolutely. Thanks to Dr. Jeff Thompson. Great resource of horror film and really general film history. Just has a wealth of knowledge, and how he remembers it all, I have absolutely no idea, but somehow he does. Thanks also to Tracy, our co-host and producer as well. We thank all of you for joining us in this Museum of the Macabre, and we do hope you'll see us again next time right here in the Ghostly Gallery.